A little while ago, Aaron, also known as Maven Fiction, came down to the studio and we captured a conversation we had in the live room. This conversation ended up being over an hour long, so I've chopped it up into 3 different parts. And in this part 1, we talk about the design of the live room, the build, some of the features the live room has, and some of the instruments that we have on offer here at the studio. Enjoy.
Definitely need to talk about the live room first, and some of the things in it. So, what was the idea behind this particular live room?
So the idea behind this room was basically to make it big enough to be able to record multiple people at the same time, but also small enough so that it didn't feel like you were recording in a big cavernous space. So we tried to kind of get that balance between kind of that feeling of space and the feeling of kind of that kind of warm comfort blanket that you want when you're kind of hunkering down and recording. So we kind of did that with obviously the different kind of area rugs and the different kind of areas for like instruments to live and be kind of stored to kind of make it feel a little bit more kind of welcoming, and then we can obviously move it out and have a big empty space as well. And the idea with the acoustics was to make it feel bright and live, not like you're recording in a really kind of small dry space, but then have the flexibility to have other spaces that were more dead if we wanted to get that kind of close sound, or we can use the various kind of gobos to focus in the sound around different instruments.
I think it is interesting actually that, because I've not performed anything in here yet, although I'm sure I will. But my space at home has to be really dry for mixing. But the issue with that is when I try and write or perform in there, it feels so dry. It almost like it becomes really hard to perform. It's like really sterile, and I find it really difficult. And it's almost like I can't even stay in key when I'm singing and things because it's so dry.
It sucks the life out of a performance.
Yeah, it definitely does. And, when I was sort of setting that space up, it had to be really multi-purpose. And there's still a few resonant frequencies that drive me mental and stuff. But, like, it's almost unusable for the track. I have to do the tracking in there, but it's almost unusable for that. And I think that, like, I can already feel when I'm in here, it feels more natural. It feels like a natural space without, again, having that, like, any accentuated frequency.
Yeah, well, we deliberately designed it in that way by having no parallel walls. So you don't end up with the flutter echo that often happens with having parallel walls in a square room, effectively.
But it's subtle, isn't it? You can't even, when you're in here.
Yeah. It doesn't. Yeah, it's only when you start looking at how the floorboards run that you can see that it splays out ever so slightly. I mean, when we worked with the studio designer, he was saying that it doesn't have to be a real obvious kind of angle. It can be the subtle, and it's just that little subtlety of it which stops the waves forming. But again, we've also got the bass polycylindrical bass traps to aid that as well. And
you did well there.
yeah. Again, and they help with obviously the low frequencies, but they also help with diffusing the higher frequencies as well in the space. And again, we can brighten the room up even more, obviously by rolling all the rugs back. But a lot of the time we keep the rugs in to just to stop that floor to ceiling transfer that happens.
I suppose it's only if you really want like a really lively kit or something that you'd have to start worrying about.
Yeah,
it being that bright.
And again, we can roll portion of the rugs back and put mics further into the room to get that kind of more kind of bright like sound, and then obviously close to whatever you're recording, you can have the area rug. A lot of the time, I think rugs give musicians a safe space to be in. So like when we do tracking days and we've got multiple instrumentalists all playing together, like everyone's got their own kind of designated area where they can kind of live for the day.
It's funny because I didn't even notice that until you mentioned it, and it is sort of set out in little islands, isn't it? You know, where you can, and I suppose from a design perspective on the day, from an engineering perspective, I suppose that kind of helps a little bit as well, doesn't it? Just to separate people. That's quite interesting. It's things that you just don't think about until
you're actually in it. Yeah. Yes, definitely.
So, like, obviously, you went with a studio designer based in France. I know that's sort of a little bit irrelevant, but I suppose, like, why him in particular? Why his company? You know, it is quite far away.
It is. I'd been in various studios over the years and been part of the process of fitting out a studio. And during that portion of time, we had various different studio designers like that we kind of had in to kind of do the initial assessments. And Howard, studio wizard, I just clicked with him when he came round originally, and I kind of knew if I was going to build a studio, he would be one of the kind of people that I would initially contact to see about designs and how to go about the actual kind of mammoth task of building something from the ground up. So we got on a call and we started chatting, and then basically I went with him because he's just very seasoned. He was one of the first people to design studios. He's been doing it for a long time. And again, we were doing it during COVID. So again, people weren't traveling a lot anyway. So you're already kind of doing a lot of stuff online. So the fact that he wasn't local didn't really impede the process at all. There was a lot of video calls, a lot of standing in the room, taking photos and measurements and sending them across backwards and forwards. But yeah, he was really, really on hand and just at the other end of the phone while the builders were building it, just to be able to kind of pick up any calls as well, which was really useful.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, like, 'cause obviously he was a local building firm as well. I think, like, that in itself, you know, it's not every day that you build something like this, and the level of sort of nuanced decisions that go on. I think, you know, because a lot of time in a building perspective, been from that background initially myself, like, you know, you're doing what is the best for the build, but in this case, that isn't always the best for the acoustics, and that presents issues in itself.
Even asking a builder to build walls that aren't parallel is intentionally.
I could have pointed you to some builders
intentionally,
not intentionally,
but no. I mean, we used a local firm, Hewitt's Home Improvements, to build the studio, and that was partly I'd seen his work. We'd had work done at home, and he was so methodical with the way he was laying out the materials that were coming to site. I was like, if he's doing that level of detail on the front end, then I know that everything like that you can't see is also being kind of taken care of, because obviously there's like the finished part of the studio build is what you see, but there's so many layers of detail and soundproofing that you don't see, that you need to be able to trust that are going to be done correctly.
Because otherwise it's at the detriment of the entire build, isn't it? You know, what you're doing, it like, you know, that level of design that goes into it, if that's not met, the whole studio doesn't operate like it's meant to operate.
100%. I mean, until we actually put all of the glass in and put the doors on and the seals around it, we had no idea whether or not it was going to be 100% soundproofed. And that relief when it all came together, and we were starting to do like kind of preliminary testing of plugging in a phone into a loudspeaker and seeing how loud we could crank it before your ears bled was really satisfying. But it's a testament to the builders, to be honest, and the studio
And the
design.
design,
But
definitely.
yeah,
I mean, it was incredible when we shut the door earlier, and it feels like you've gone deaf, doesn't it? Yeah, it is incredible. What about, like, because from an aesthetic point of view, and I know I mentioned it here, but when I walked into here, I had this real feel about it, like that I don't think I've experienced in many studios. They're always creative spaces, but, they do always, like you have, they've put the acoustics first, and sometimes the aesthetic sort of isn't the most important thing. But in here, it's a beautiful studio. It's a beautiful space. It feels inviting and warm and all the rest of it, but also feels like it would breed creativity. But, like, how was that part of what Howard did, or was that just something that you sort of...
It's a combination. Howard, again, we used him for the details of the polycylindrical panels, which are a kind of a big aesthetic within the studio.
No visible fixings, except for obviously what's at the side holding them to the walls. But obviously, from what we know, sound like the fixings are what the sound travels through. So obviously that's important. So I kind of guess that more from a nerdy woodworking perspective of how they've sort of achieved that than anything.
Well, again, we kind of went really deep with the kind of the level of construction that every wall within the studio itself, like this from the sound lock through to all the rooms, is obviously it's studded off with rock wool. Then there's a layer of plasterboard. Then there's a layer of ply, and then there's a layer of plasterboard, which means that we can just fix directly in, and we're never going into the brickwork or the blockwork that's behind, which is the acoustic, like the acoustic layer. So it was
just creates that barrier.
It creates that barrier, but also means you're never breaching that barrier when you're kind of fixing things to the walls.
I mean, everything is so intricately thought out, even like your cable tracking and things, and your light, just more like your practical lighting and things like that. It's really, really well thought. You've kept a lot of original features. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love to see stuff like that. So it's really cool. But yeah, let's talk a bit about some of the stuff that's in here, instrumentation wise. Like the Hammond. We've got the Hammond that is like the elephant in the room that we have to talk about. So where did you pick this up? Why did you pick this up? What's the story?
Well, every studio needs a Hammond organ. And this one I got from Manchester, and it was from a guy who passed away, and his family were getting rid of it, and it was in the same family, well, from new, so it'd never really been moved about, which is often with Hammond organs. They're in various states of disrepair because they've been gigged, or they've been like, it's nearly 50 years old. So it's the last. Again, with a lot of the pieces I've got, I try to get like the later version so that it'll last as long as possible and be reliable as long as possible. So it's the last of the true tone wheel Hammond organs. It's solid state, although the Leslie is valve. So it's that kind of hybrid. I mean, the early Hammond organs were all valve, but obviously there's a layer of kind of maintenance and everything to do with that. So the transistor ones were slightly more reliable, different sound.
To make it lighter.
It makes it's still heavy, but it gives it like it's slightly different sound. It's a cleaner sound. Like it's not like the whiter shade of pale, like kind of real dirty. But the fact it's running through valves to get to the Leslie gives it that kind of that thing. And then I think sometimes it's nicer to have a cleaner sound that you can then dirty up further down the line using character microphones.
Option. Yeah. Nice on the option.
Again, with the Leslie cab, we've got a line in, so technically we can put something in between the output of the Hammond organ to the Leslie, and we could actually dirty it up by sticking it through some more valves or overdrives or whatever to change the sound.
And do you ever run anything else through it, like an amp?
Yes, we do the guitars through the Leslie, right? Probably every opportunity.
Yeah.
it's nice if it's nice to have different things to play with in the studio and just spark creativity. We had someone down the other day, and we were tracking, and I said, "Oh, let's put the guitar through." And while we were just getting levels through, he started playing something else, and he was almost just like, "I need to now write a different song. Now I've got this combination of sounds." Like, so it's quite nice, and it can kind of like, you know, take you down a different avenue, or allow you to kind of experiment with different tones. And again, it's no one else has got that specific, like that specific one that's aged in that way with that specific cabinet. So then it always breeds a little bit of kind of uniqueness to a sound, where if you're using a plugin, everyone's got the same version of that plugin, and it's useful to have that kind of those tools. Same with obviously the pianos as well. It's nice to have the real pianos to allow you to kind of record that particular piano in that room, which gives it its own character.
I think there's something that, you know, like with the piano, like the upright over there, a piano plays like a piano as well. That's the other thing from the player's perspective. Like, if you start getting into the VST realm and you're using sort of a cheap keyboard, it doesn't play like a piano.
You don't get the feedback in the same way, do you?
No, there's no, you know, I know you can get them with the hammer action and stuff, but
I think we've got to the point where you've got, like, I mean, I've got the Node, and it's got, you know, some of the best recorded pianos ever. So it plays, and it's a pristine, fantastic piano sound. And that's great, and that's got its place in production, and but everyone else has got that sound. So you then need to try and find something else to make you sound a little bit distinctive, or a little bit different. Whereas having the real thing gives you that like I said before, that is the difference. That is the uniqueness about that particular thing, that particular sound you're recording.
Definitely. No, I definitely agree. You know, it's a luxury item, but it's one that definitely separates the studio, you know, from another studio. And so obviously we've got the MS-20. I've got a little one of them, you know, the reissues.
Yeah. It's great because they've got MIDI.
Yeah, great because they've got MIDI. Smaller.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Ironically, more noise than the original.
Yes. Yeah. Do you use the headphone now or the little line?
Yeah.
That little trick.
Yeah. Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? But yeah, definitely worth having.
Yeah. I mean, we've got other fruity stuff like a set of timpani, because why not? Like, it's quite fun to crack open the timpani every now and again.
I suppose as well, like, you know, you're not always just doing, you know, that the more obvious work that a studio does. You know, like, I know you do a lot of voiceover work here and stuff. Like, we're talking about like not sort of more normal productions at the minute with a band coming in or an artist coming in. But like, there'll be times where you'll be doing sort of sync work or something like that, where something like that really comes into its own, doesn't it? You know. So yeah, great to have.
Yeah, definitely. I think like now in the current times, rather than a studio just being a blank canvas where you would hire a load of gear and go in, it's now about having quality instruments that you mightn't have access to on a regular basis, and have the ability to augment that with stuff being brought in, but also same with the guitars and everything, having very playable instruments that can be used at a moment's notice if you want to add anything to a track. Or
from a mixing perspective as well, like, you know, if someone comes in with a guitar and an amp that they love and you're going to try and capture that, it's fair enough, but sometimes it's about what best serves the song.
Definitely.
And if, you know, you as a producer and a mix engineer, you know what's going to best serve that recording at that time, and anything that happens there and after is a different version of that song, in it, you know. But sometimes when you're trying to get the mix of a song, you know, because we spoke about this earlier, but you can record a song a load of different times and they all live within their own rights. But there is a bit of a mindset these days of having the mix of that song. You know, this is the song. Actually, the song lives in whatever form you put it in. But so I suppose it's like about serving that, and these things allow it, you know.
But it's also, I mean, you come in with a really nice guitar and a really nice amp, and then if you want to double it to get a bigger sound, you want something which has got a contrasting tone to give it that space. So it's having the option to have something the opposite of what you've brought in sometimes to kind of, to serve the song and to add extra layers. And it just sometimes, I mean, obviously depending on your level, sometimes people are coming in and the instruments are fine and they're in tune lower down until you come up to start playing, like doing solos or like alternative parts, and you find that the intonation's not great. Well, rather than spending time getting the intonation in, we can just pick another instrument up that is, and then we can add all those parts in as well. So it's keeps moving forward within the creative process. Again, with sessions as much as possible, we try and have everything set up before a session so that you can stay within that kind of creative zone when creating music and recording.
Yeah, definitely. It is those things that can kill a session, in it, where you're sort of like getting. And I know a lot from working on by myself and working at home by myself a lot of the times, and there's like things that it only takes one thing to go wrong, and that's now your day.
Yeah.
Not whatever you were gonna do. That is now your day.
Yeah,
fixing that,
trying to fix it, or problem solve,
or like, sulking about it. In my case,
or it can just knock you off your creative juice. Full stop. So it is about staying on it. Again, I'm very much a case of if it works, it's in. If it's not working, it's out of sight, so that people aren't picking up and you're going, oh yeah, well that works apart from, or that this is the knack for it. It like that all just kind of. Sometimes broken gear is great because it does a thing, like or one gear like the Space Echo that's got a very certain sound it does, but it still works and it still does what you're trying to do, and it's just got its own character on. But if something's like, you have to hit it and do this and then hold the power cable in to get it to work, then it's kind of like that just stalls the process. So that's what we try and do here.
Yeah, just keep things moving. Definitely.